Welcome to yet another episode of the brand called You. We have brought a lot of very, very interesting individuals, and today we have someone who has really reached the pinnacle of the corporate world, Manu Anand. Manu, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Manu is a Stephanian, did his honors in physics. He's a chartered accountant. Then he joined ICI, he worked for Frito-Lay. He was chairman and president of PepsiCo in India. And then he was president Asia, Middle East and Africa of Mondelēz, the chocolate company. What a fascinating career. Manu, you started off life as a chartered accountant. You were one of the few people who I know who as a finance person has made it so big in the corporate world. What was the secret of this success?
Well, I don't think there was any secret as such. It was just going along with doing what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Just to share a little bit of the background, started, as you said, as a chartered accountant. And in fact, I even drifted into chartered accountancy. And now I look back and say, how did I end up a chartered accountant? I'm not quite sure because I did my undergrad in physics, but ended up being a chartered accountant. And I started working for then what was a lovely company, ICI India, and got great experiences working across their various businesses. So whether it was paints and rubber chemicals, or whether it pharmaceuticals, agrochemicals, explosives. So for 12 years, worked for them across a cross-section of businesses, different locations in India, and different kinds of roles, pure hardcore transaction processing to controls and accounting to business accounting. And actually, when I was doing the planning and business finance part, that's when I started getting very interested in businesses. And I did this role in paints as the finance manager, as the business partner to the general manager. And that's when I started saying, I love business, getting into businesses, getting to learn about what the consumer, customer, supply chain is all about. And that got me thinking that, look, if I really wanted to do something in life, what would I want to do? And I said, it's to be the general manager to head a business. And I realized that, well, continuing in the finance stream in a company that was, well, not growing may not have been the best way to build that experience. And somebody advised me, well, you want end-to-end experience, join a startup, and that to join a startup in consumer products. And so when I got an opportunity to join Frito-Lay India, it was a business that had shut down and restarting as their CFO. I jumped into it and people said, are you mad? You're joining a company with a turnover was literally a few crores. You're giving up a nice, safe, secure job. ICI, like ITC, was a company you joined, and then you retired from that company. And people said, you are leaving behind a pension. Are you crazy? But I said, look, I've got a whole career ahead of me. I want some new experiences, exciting experiences. So I joined this company. It was a tiny little company, a startup. It was great fun, learning end-to-end, just putting in basic systems. And see, the good part of a small company is you get to know everything.
Correct.
And when you're working on tight budgets, you're either short of a head of sales at some point or short of a head of operations at some point. And I used to keep raising my hand and saying, I'll do that as a night job. My day job, of course, would continue to be the CFO. So I built up a very good set of experiences. And each time I'd learn something new, I'd be more convinced that I think I can head a business. I think I can do a good job. And that's what I want to do. At that point, PepsiCo had other ideas. They said, no, before we give you that break, first we want to give you a global exposure. So they packed me off to Australia for a year, and I worked on a very, very exciting M&A
And that was
project.
with Frito-Lay also?
That was with Frito-Lay. And that time, Frito-Lay and Pepsi used to operate as separate businesses. And so I did a very interesting acquisition M&A assignment in Australia for a better part of the year. And then I'd say I was lucky. I was the right place at the right time. I had the India head job opened up, and I came back to head the India business. And that was my first exposure as general manager.
Wow.
Did that job for 9 years.
Amazing.
Now, people ask me, how did you do the same job for 9 years? And I said, no, it wasn't the same job for 9 years because we started with a tiny company and ended up with a big operation. It was a new job every year building this out, but really great fun because not only was it building a business, it was actually building an industry.
Yeah.
Branded salty snacks did not exist. You got namkeens in packets, you got potato chips in poly packs. And that was the time that we really took the lead in building it out into a branded industry, which is now a scale industry.
Yeah.
And that was great fun. That was really great fun.
Yeah, I guess, Frito-Lay was the company that really brought the dal bhujia and the chana dal and everything else into such fascinating packaging. And that's what must have really set the trend, isn't
That
it?
set both that and the potato chips, and then innovation like Kurkure set the trend, and then a lot of other companies
Yeah,
did
of
a great
course.
job of building that or building similar businesses. But it was a very interesting job because I mean, to make a good potato chip, you got to grow a good potato,
Yeah.
which didn't grow in India. So you got into agri all the way up to consumer. It couldn't have been more fun, more exciting, and great learning. So that was great
So
fun.
did you have to go through a lot of research before you took a decision? Because this was completely not, I wouldn't even say mom and pop sector. It's completely unorganized halwai sitting and doing it in every little city.
Yeah, well, there was like any other consumer product, there's an element of research, and then you say, okay, that's great, but those are only inputs. And then there's just business judgment and common sense.
Correct.
And surround yourself with a team of good people who understand consumer and customer well, and then work together to come out with the right decision. So that was a great experience. And
how do you convince your big American company that you needed to start something different? I mean, I was talking to McDonald's, and they had a very difficult time convincing McDonald's worldwide to launch a vegetarian burger. So I was thinking of you, and how did you manage to do something like this?
Well, it was easier to convince them because they started their business with the US model. And 3 years later, they had lost so much money that they had to shut it down.
Okay.
So they were prepared to listen to any idea that would allow you to grow the business without too much investment. And the logic we explained to them was simple.
Yeah.
Branded potato chips today are not well penetrated.
Yeah.
You need to build a distribution system. Let's build it on products that penetrate the distribution system. And so the namkeens, on the back of which we built out the potato chip business. And that worked because interestingly, over time, the namkeen business fell into the background, and it was the potato chips and the kurkure and the other Cheetos that took over and built out that business on the back of that. But had it been a focused market with a lot of expats wanting to give you inputs and help, we probably would never have got to that stage, and we'd have still been trying to build out a potato chip business without the backbone of a distribution system.
Amazing. Well, let me take you back to ICI. You and I were together in Calcutta. I was at ITCU with ICI. In those days, very British companies. Very, very strong management, corporate cultures. And from there, you moved into American companies. How was that change of culture?
It was a big shift. And I think the cultural change came on two fronts. One is, if you recollect the time we used to work in Calcutta, everything was licensed.
Yeah.
Demand was in excess of capacity, so I guess business was just that much easier to do. And the issues that you were focused on were other things like union and labor and things like that, and not really on consumer or customer. Let's be honest, there were 9:30 to 5:30 jobs. I mean, I remember in my days at Calcutta, 6 o'clock in the evening, I'd be at Rackets Club playing squash. I can't think of having worked weekends. And of course, you never had telephones, so there was no calls coming at home late in the evening. Or your telephones in Calcutta never worked, whichever way it was. But they were organized companies, good systems, good processes, good support staffs, everything. And then I came out of that into an American startup culture where it felt like the Wild West initially. There was really very little infrastructure. You had to put in everything. A small P&L, so you couldn't build up large organizations. And you had to do so much more yourself that you were not used to. But that also taught you how inefficient possibly we were in the old days and how comfortable we had got with a secure P&L, knowing that your top line is going to grow, that you're not going to lose market share because there's no additional capacity coming in, so you're in a safe position. And you could just run your business in a business as usual way. So it was a big cultural transformation, but a huge learning experience. I learned a lot in ICI. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about people management because, in those days you had large groups of people in transaction processing that you had to manage. I learned a lot about customer management and channel management in the paints business. But coming to the American company, I learned how to do things frugally, quickly. Second, of course, was speed. You just had to do, in British companies, you could take your time. Here, every quarter was a new life.
Yeah.
And the other part I had to just do was speed. So it was great learning from both companies.
Very interesting. So, I was talking to some very, very senior human resources lady, and she was speaking to me about culture and how important it is for startups to build a strong culture. So, as someone who has spent all his life in multinationals, which have a strong culture, what would be some of your key takeaways of culture in an organization that is well established versus culture that startups need to think about?
Okay. Well, that's a great question because I think it goes back to our previous question that we talked about. ICI had a very established culture. You knew how it operated, you knew how the formal network operated, you knew how the informal network operated, you knew the value systems. And as we moved to a startup, now PepsiCo India, Frito-Lay those days, while you were part of a large multinational, you were also in a way a startup, and you were building and evolving your own day-to-day operating culture. While of course there were certain aspects of the corporate culture and governance which were sacrosanct, and thank God for that, because it's always good to work in a setup like that. And we had to evolve our own culture, how we take decisions, how the network works, how we keep each other informed as to what was happening, what are the do's and don'ts, what are the absolute lines not to cross. Of course, the boundaries were well known with it, but within that, every company does things different. So I had a good experience of building a culture, but more importantly then evolving it from a small startup, as we grew to larger companies, being able to make that transition of adjusting to, hey, we can't run this company the way we used to yesterday. We are 5 times that size. How do we change differently while keeping certain things common, which is entrepreneurial, business-oriented, strong eye on the P&L, and continuously focused on the consumer.
Wonderful. So coming back to your journey, we spoke about Frito-Lay. When did you move to Pepsi? And talk to us about your journey in Pepsi.
Yeah. So after heading Frito for 9 years, about that time, PepsiCo had gone into what they called Power of One, where they started merging the snacks and beverage businesses under a common leadership team. Obviously, I was keen to do the top job in India, but I had no beverage experience. So they gave me, fortunately, they gave me a great opportunity where I went to head the combined snacks and beverage businesses in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
It was a collection of 7-8 countries, interesting business models, company-owned, franchise, snacks businesses, joint ventures, and very different geographies. So I think that was a phenomenal experience because it was learning at multiple levels. Learning in new geographies, and each one of those geographies is slightly different. Those countries were different. So learning, Vietnam and Thailand are very, very different culturally, for example. So learning to operate in a multicultural environment, learning the beverage business, of course. And the third was moving from running a business and really going into depth to running a portfolio of businesses and learning to what level you have to detail you need to get into and where you have to just delegate effectively to businesses which had great general managers. So that was a phenomenal 3-year learning experience. And I think by then the company felt comfortable that I knew the beverage business and I could manage the larger scale business. So I came back to head the combined snacks and beverage businesses with the title of head of Chairman of PepsiCo India. And that was another very interesting journey.
So, for a very high profile organization like Pepsi, and being the numero uno, the chairman of Pepsi India, that must have been a challenging job. What were some of your key challenges there?
Well, the normal business challenges were there. Those don't go away. They'd become competitive businesses. In the beverage side, you have the normal, the duopoly that you were always dealing. Pepsi
and keep hoping for a hotter summer.
Keep hoping for hotter summer. The snacks businesses saw a lot of new entrants, including ITC. So there was continuous competition there that we had to work. So that, at the end, was the core of the job. If you manage that well, everything else then follows. But equally, as you said, being a high-profile company, you were always in the eye of the media. You were always in the eye of NGOs. You were always in the eye of government and regulatory authorities. So a lot of time would be spent on making sure we've got the right governance. We are effectively projecting our brand without necessarily being overly, let's say, media hyped up, but making sure that we do the right things for projecting both our corporate and individual brands. And above all, making sure that as a company, we have the right value systems, that you would never have to worry about something radically wrong going on in the company, something unethical going on in the company. And a lot of time spent on training people on that, on continuously talking to people from the day they joined about that. And it was something that the entire management team had to do all the time.
Everyone I speak to from large corporate world speaks of two things that you also mentioned. One is strong culture and strong value systems. And I keep emphasizing the need for strong values in any organization. Any thoughts on a strong value-based organization?
Okay. Well, firstly, as an individual, I think the most important is to work in an organization whose value systems are in sync with your personal value system. Because if those are not, you're going to be a very unhappy person all the time. honestly, at the end, we all go in there, we're professionals, we go to work, and the one thing we would hate to do, and you wouldn't want to do it, and wouldn't want to ask anybody to do something which they consider ethically wrong or unethical in any way whatsoever. So if you can't set that right in the company and you can't define that to people who come, then you could result in a lot of dissatisfied employees or employees who misinterpret something and do it in a way that the company would not like to do it. So I think that's got to be a bedrock or a foundation for any organization, for them to be able to focus then on the business versus worry about what's going to go wrong.
Interesting. So after Pepsi came Mondelēz.
After PepsiCo came Mondelēz.
How was that journey? And how did you make the transition, and how was that journey?
Well, it was an interesting change. I mean, I'd spent about 20 years with PepsiCo then, and by then I was touching about 55. I was clear I wanted to work for at best 5 years more. And I said, why not do something different now? Not that PepsiCo was a great company, great organization. I've been very happy there. But I said, let's do something different. And something different, by then we were empty nesters, so we were mobile, we were happy to move around. So when Mondelēz contacted me first to head the India business, I said, well, sounds fun because, and the one thing that attracted me, as a youngster working in Bombay, I used to drive past Cadbury House every day. As a youngster, I used to eat Cadbury chocolates and love Cadbury chocolates and Bonvita. So I said, here's a chance, and I just used to look at that building and say, wow, lucky guys who come and work here every day. So I said, well, here's a chance for me to come in here and work for a brand that I truly, truly love. And that's one of the reasons. Now, there's another interesting anecdote. I told people the first day I joined Mondelēz was I had only been to Cadbury House once before that. And that was in my days in Ferguson when Cadbury was an audit that Ferguson was doing. And my first day in Ferguson, I was told, go to Cadbury House. And I went in there absolutely raw. And I was put in the basement and asked to do some work. And I was a science graduate. I wasn't even a commerce graduate. So obviously I made a mess of something on the first day. And the audit manager said, you know what, you're not ready to come here as yet. Just go back to the office and let them assign you somewhere else. So I told everybody, last time I was here, I was thrown out in 48 hours. So this time I hope I do a better job now that I've come back here. So there was some old emotional connection with brand Cadbury. Yeah. The fact that such an exciting brand and the desire to do something new took me there.
And you ran Asia, Middle East, and Africa. That's a huge territory.
That was a huge territory. That was probably...
So were you constantly on a plane?
I was on a plane a fair amount of time, yes. I know when I wasn't on a plane, I was speaking into a video screen all the time. But honestly, I say I finished my career possibly doing the best job. I mean, when you tell somebody I was president of chocolates for Asia, Middle East, Africa, a company which has brands like Cadbury, Toblerone, and Milka. I said, wow. I mean, how can we get your job? And you got to work bloody hard to get there. But it was a fascinating job because you had big developed markets like Australia, a big market in India, but probably in a different model. Markets like Egypt, South Africa. We launched in China when I was running that business, and so it was fascinating. Yes, it required A, being on a plane, B, being on calls at all odd hours because you were dealing with the office back in New York, in Chicago as well. But it was a wonderful job, really exciting because as a category it's so exciting, and then you get a chance to interact with consumers who you just love your brands, and there's nothing more exciting than that.
So you've done 3 stints outside India. I have often said that we have a lot of people who are a global audience who listens to us. But so I'm going to be a little parochial here. But I've always believed that Indians make very, very good expatriate managers, because Indians are working all over the world in companies of all kinds of backgrounds. Why do you think that happens?
I think there are 2 or 3 reasons. I think one is we're just very, very adaptable. And I remember giving somebody an example when I was running of Thailand versus India, when I was just comparing the 2 businesses that we had there. In those days in India, we had 25 different sales tax laws, different octroi laws, different excise classifications, and then you were perpetually dealing with transport strike here, a band here, a hartal there, and trying to work your way through that. You were trying to distribute in a mass of 2 million outlets versus most companies which sell to 5 or 10 large customers. So we learned to be very flexible, adaptable, think on our feet, and work our way out of situations very, very well and very, very quickly. Nothing overawes us or gets us too worried, because we're just used to dealing with complexity. You're used to dealing with crisis, and that makes it very easy to adapt. I think, secondly, we are quick learners. We work very hard to learn quickly, we adapt quickly. So I think there are a couple of these strengths that really work in our favor. But at the same time, I think there are a couple of watch-outs that I always used to tell people after my experiences when Indians would go out to expert assignments, and I'd say there are two. One is, we're not the best of listeners. And working in global assignments, we've really got to improve our listening skills, because we like to say what's in our mind, and we're busy telling people about what we think, not sometimes spending enough time being great listeners. And the second, not the best team workers. And I don't mean team workers that we negatively go out and sabotage other people. But India, it's everybody's trying to excel, and everybody's trying to show that they're the best at what they're doing. And sometimes they forget to carry the team or give enough credit to co-workers as they get along. And these are the couple of watch-outs I'd always tell people about when they head out to expat
That's a very, very interesting observation, because I've said that, because of the sheer population we have, from the time we are children, we are always told, get ahead, get ahead.
Absolutely.
And that has started reflecting in traffic. Somehow or the other, you've got to get your car right in front.
That's true.
That has started happening when there's a queue. Somehow or the other, I must get right in front. So that's a very, very good observation.
And that's the one I tell people, that you will get the credit if the team wins. You don't have to be always saying, I'm the guy who did it. You don't have to dominate the share of voice in a meeting, in a half an hour meeting, be speaking for 15 minutes to show you're the brightest guy in the room. It's your actions that will tell people that you are.
So, we are of a generation when I think companies had begun to start realizing the potential of Indian managers. 35 years later, do you see much greater opportunities for Indian managers to live and work outside with multinationals?
I think so, clearly, and we're seeing that across companies, because I think a couple of added dimensions to what we talked about. One is, I think the next generation are getting more global in their education. They're getting more global in their outlook. I mean, I tell people that the first time I got on a plane and traveled out of India was when I was the age of 29 or 30. I didn't know what it felt like to go through immigration. I think younger people are just getting global exposure much earlier, and therefore creating that global activity. Honestly, I think things like the IB system of education just helps the younger kids get more global in the way they think, versus, let's say, the way we studied, which was a lot about, well, let me mug all this up and go and write it out in those 3 hours I've got there. So I think our kids are getting better trained to be global citizens and to do well globally much earlier in life. And combine that with all the other strengths that we talked about, which a lot of people in India have. And I think we got a great expat opportunities for the next generation.
So one more question before I move on to some more personal items, questions. You have worked only for 3 companies, right? ICI, Frito-Lay, Pepsi, and Mondelēz. And you made it right to the top of these big companies running huge, not a country, but a region. 3 regions maybe. What is the advantage of staying with 1 or 2 or 3 companies versus today's concept of jumping jobs every 2 years?
Well, I guess, to me, if you look at why do people move around? Firstly, there's a negative aspect. I don't like the culture in my company. It's toxic. Or I got a boss and he and I just can't see eye to eye, and it's miserable every day going to work. But if you take those aside and say I'm enjoying myself in the company, then I think there are only 2 or 3 reasons, but at least in my mind, why one should be making changes. One, I'm not getting enough new experiences. I'm getting into a rut. I'm not getting enough experiences. So long as the company is giving you great experiences, there's no hurry. There's no reason to change. You can build new skills and new capabilities in the same company. I guess the second, of course, is upward movement. I'm not getting my promotions. I feel I'm blocked because of whatever reason. There's people my age above me or whatever that is. So again, if that's not a reason, then probably you don't have to rush out. And the third is, well, I'm getting an increase, or I'm getting a big salary increase, or things like that. That's going to make a big difference. Now, to me, if you're getting those 3 in your existing organization, new experiences, the right movement, and honestly, while short-term salary increases sound great, maximum asset or wealth creation happens with longer careers, with things like stock options and bonuses being a little more long-term and not so short-term. I honestly did not have any reason to change, and the 2 changes I made were for specific reasons. When I left ICI, it was But I say at that time was not growing. In fact, they were selling off businesses. So I could clearly see that the growth opportunities are not. And I wanted specifically some new experiences. When I left PepsiCo, it was, well, I had now done the same thing for about 20 years, and I couldn't see a new set of experiences opening up for me in the organization. That's the only reason I made the two changes I did. And otherwise, I've been very happy with the longer career. So my advice to people, if you're getting what you want where you are, there will always be somebody calling you and offering you a little more money or tempting you with a change. But ask yourselves, what difference is that going to make to your life? Which one is going to give you more pleasure in life? At the end, if you're working for an organization, working with good people, you like the value systems of the organization you're working, you're respected, you're getting the respect you want. Think twice before just jumping for whatever else you're jumping for.
Very true. So I'm going to move into another aspect of your life. I wrote a book on retirement. And to me, retirement is really on account of the superannuation policies of your employer and nothing to do with you. And for some strange reason in India, we don't like to talk retirement. It's like a taboo subject. And yet, most of us who got reasonably good health will probably have 30 years post 60. And that life will be almost equal to your working life. And therefore, we have to plan for it. You are a business advisor. I see that you've really adjusted well in the last 6-7 months since you moved back to India. As a business advisor, as a board member of some companies, how have you embarked upon your second innings?
Well, I think firstly, the most important thing is end your first innings only when you're ready to end your first innings.
Okay.
I think at senior levels, the age or the superannuation age is irrelevant because you can add with your organization or some other organization continue till when you want to continue. In my case, for example, I chose to retire 2 years before I could have carried on to because I was ready for retirement. So the important thing is choose the timing of your choice when you're ready to do it. And I think a few factors drive that decision. One, of course, you have to have created enough asset to be able to be sure that you can spend the next 30 years and enjoy your life without having to worry about where the money's coming from. But secondly, I think you've got to feel that you fulfilled your agenda, your achievements, you feel happy about that. And the third, you've got to be comfortable to be living without having your corporate persona. You will lose a lot of the titles, the support systems that go with having a full-time job that at senior level. But if you're comfortable with these three, and lastly and most important, you've got to be clear that you've got something else to do with your time. Then, and if you've got enough that you think is exciting you and interesting you, that's the time to retire. And so choose your timing is to me the most important piece of advice I could give everybody. And then enjoy it. Do all the things that you never had time to do and make the most of that and get ready for that next innings. And I'm still going through that process of getting ready for that next innings. It's only been 8 or 9 months. But I'm just enjoying the downtime and enjoying the...
So at what stage of your life should one start thinking of life after superannuation or after retirement? How soon should you start planning? Because I'm sure you and I know several people who haven't planned and are quite miserable. They don't know how to fill their day.
At one time, I had thought of doing it earlier in life. But let's say I don't really thought about retiring at 55. But when I was 53, 54, I realized I was not ready for it. And it was exactly that. What will I do if tomorrow I have to start sitting at home? What will I do? And so I said, first thing, let me take some more time. Let me finish my agenda. Let me be sure that I'm clear what I want to do with that. But I guess some of these are things you've been dreaming of from every day you have a bad day in office and you come back and say, shit, I wish I didn't have to go to office tomorrow. I could be traveling, or I could be on the golf course, or I could be playing bridge with my friends or whatever. So it's stuff that you're thinking about all your life. But I think thought starts crystallizing probably 2-3 years before you're ready to retire. And once those crystallize, then you say, okay, now I think I'm ready.
Wonderful. So what keeps you going every morning?
I think there's just so much to do. Interacting with friends, catching up on some reading. For the first time, I've enjoyed watching a World Cup cricket. I've got the time to watch every match. In the past, I used to see highlights every evening, and that was about it, for example. So doing things like that, I'm nice to get back to playing golf regularly with a number of friends and travel. I really wanted, I did a lot of business travel, and therefore, when I was working, actually, when the thought of traveling on a holiday, I never enjoyed because it felt like work once again. Now traveling without an agenda is such fun. I never realized that. Just to go to a city and spend 10 days there and take your time. Spending more time with my boys. I never just got enough time, so I've been and spent time with both of them. So there's just a lot that keeps you busy. At the same time, some amount of work going to keep you engaged, keep you abreast of what's happening in the various industries that you've been linked with or would like to be linked with, and keep the learning going. I mean, never stop learning is one of the mantras that I always believed in. So it really it keeps me well engaged.
Fabulous. So one question I love to ask all my guests is, tell us about your learnings from your failures.
Look,
Or
firstly,
a learning from a failure, whatever.
Firstly, I think in the kind of jobs that I've had, there's been a huge list of failures, and I acknowledge those. I mean, you're taking big decisions, you're taking consumer-facing decisions, you're taking investment decisions. You can be sure that you'll get 20 to 30% of them wrong, and that's the reality. And I think the few learnings that I've had, first, learn to spot the failure early, and I think that's where a number of us go wrong. And in my earlier years, I used to go wrong because it's a decision you've taken, it's a brand you've launched, it's an investment that you've made in something. You want to make it work, and you're not willing to recognize as a failure. You're more comfortable saying, well, we haven't done it correctly, let's give it one more chance. So I think the first is just recognize that things aren't going right. The second is own the failure. It's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, XYZ advised me and I followed their advice, or my team told me this, or those guys didn't execute well. No. If you're the man in the chair, it's your failure, own the failure. And of course, do your best to salvage what you can out of that failure and make the most for it. And importantly, get the people associated with that assignment, get them to feel comfortable that they are not seen as failures because that particular venture, business, launch, whatever it was, failed. So do the right thing for the people, build back their confidence. But lastly, I think the most important is reflect on the failure truly with yourself, and maybe talk to a few close friends who would tell you the truth to your face, and reflect, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? What would I do differently? Because I think the most important thing about it is not to repeat a failure. I mean, we'll all fail. If you repeat the failure, then you're not doing the right thing.
So my last question, Manu, as someone who has spent 3.5 decades in the corporate world, what would your advice be to young managers 3, 4, 5 years into their lives and looking ahead, starry-eyed, as at the chairman of Pepsi or the chairman of Mondelēz, and saying, one day I'll get there? What would your advice be to them?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is it's a long career ahead of you. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So think it through and pace yourself. I think a few things that I would really advise people. Firstly, enjoy what you do. Don't get so obsessed with getting into a position or into a particular role just to do it, to be able to get somewhere if you're not enjoying it. You've got to get up and go to work feeling energized every morning. The second is always give it your best shot. You've got to come back home in the evening saying, I don't think I left anything out there today. I did whatever the best I could. Some days things will work, some days things will not work. But reflect honestly, truly to yourself, and be sure that you're doing that you gave it your best shot. The third I'd say is continue to learn, never stop learning. Always look for new assignments, always look for different experiences, because at the end they all accumulate and help you do the big jobs that you're going to work later. The more you can get and the more you can learn, the better you will do that job when it comes to you. Surround yourself with great people, work with great people, learn from people, find mentors, find people who can give you advice and help, and in turn mentor other people, because that all again helps you build a great corporate reputation. It helps you build a great team around you and people who help you.
Wonderful.
Never compromise your values. Whatever you do, never compromise your values. And if you find your personal values are compromised, then sit down and really think about what you're going to do about it. Because if you're working in an environment where your values are compromised, you will be the most unhappy person. But above all, and remember, it's a marathon. Manage your work-life balance. You've got to take care of the work, of course. That's important. That's got to get ahead. You've got a family, and then lastly, you've got yourself. Look after your health. Keep your exercise. Keep a recreation that allows you to de-stress. Because if you go back on Monday morning stressed, you're never going to get over that. So manage that long marathon effectively by keeping a good work-life balance.
Manu, thank you very much. I think your incredible words of wisdom will be heard by thousands and thousands of people. And I'm grateful that you've been so transparent, so honest with all your comments.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
you.
It was a pleasure
Thank you
being
so
here.
much.
Thanks.
for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for the Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.